Glasgow is the most fabulous city. My great Glaswegian friend Jenny Godley says Nicholas Parsons, born in England, but made in Glasgow.
Glasgow is remembered by everybody in our business, pure and simply from the Glasgow Empire, which was reputed to be the comedian's graveyard.
All I can say, and I hope everybody forgive me, is only my laundryman myself knew how terrified I was.
I fainted with fear at Glasgow Empire.
Pantomime I wanted to do in Scotland. And so anytime I had a chance to go back and do it, it'd be to Glasgow I would go.
We felt it was our audience. You know, we felt, yeah, we are Glasgow. In fact, somebody said that to us when we were up there the last time. They said, you two must be Mr. and Mrs. Glasgow now, which is a lovely saying, isn't it?
It was magical, absolutely magical. The orchestra would play the overture and you would wait there and then the curtain would rise and there were footlights. So the footlights would welcome you and you could feel the atmosphere of the audience coming towards you. It was wonderful.
It's Glasgow!
This is my city. Big town, boom town, brawling town. Ships are made here, slide down its slipways to the coffee-coloured Clyde and sail out, flanked by cranes that rear like rampant monsters to the sea.
The shipyards were a great place. It was full of humour. I think they had to be under the working conditions and that, and everybody had different nicknames and everybody knew each other, so the patter was going all the time.
Well, the patter went all day long, you know, they really did. I mean, they would have nicknames for people, you know. There was one foreman, he kept, they called him the sheriff, he kept coming rushing up and saying, "What's the hold up? What's the hold up?" He was the sheriff.
I just come from an English public school, and I was talking very much like that. And they would say, well, let's go, hey, Papa, oh no, Freddie, I'll come all the back if you to be all the. And not only that, the biggest shock of all, I discovered they were using words as adjectives I'd only seen written on lavatory walls before. It was a living, breathing experience. I mean, they may have been strange to me, but I was an absolute oddball to them. And how I survived, I don't know.
There was really a platform, hard work. They probably hated it. So it was just a platform for gags that were flying around all day. But then slowly, they thought, oh, well, maybe we could get a job in a variety theatre by night. And then slowly you might be able to leave the shipyard and then become a professional comedian or entertainer.
Some of the comedians moved up from that and made a living off from it eventually.
Billy Connolly is your example of that, you know. Billy's a wonderful example of Scots humour and comedy.
And I wear finger picks, you see that? Do you know why that is? It's because I used to work in the shipyards. Really. And the reason I wear finger picks because of the shipyards was these wee timekeepers. They used to have a wee hut and they sat in it, waiting for you. This wee wait, and it had a wee flap on the window, this wee hut. And if you were late, you were allowed 15 minutes. And I used to come clattering along with the sandwiches flying into the air, trying to get in time. Imagine running into a shipyard, you know, trying to get in. My God. And he'd wait till you were at 3 yards feet and go, ah!
There's lots of Billy Connollys around. You can walk into any pub and you'll meet a Billy Connolly.
Most pubs you go into in Glasgow, there's always a storyteller at the bar and he'll be telling you a story.
But mind you, I wasn't always lucky in New York. No fear. I had an operation when I was there. You see, they had to take a piece of bone out of my left leg, which they still have, in a bottle with a label on it. And the bottle says, The only thing that we ever got out of a Scotchman. Of course, I was unconscious at the time and I'd never have got it.
Every Glaswegian's a comic, really. And I went to a fairly posh school, but all the boys loved speaking gutter Glasgow, to the horror of their parents. And they were all rushed to elocution classes. There was a famous director at Sitters who used to say, well, Glasgow's got two industries, shipbuilding and elocution.
You can go into Glasgow, you can stand at a bus stop and talk to the woman beside you, and you will hear her whole life story before the bus comes. And you will go and sit in a restaurant, and if you sit at somebody's table and they're strangers, again, same story. You will not sit there po-faced as you would in Edinburgh and not talk.
Edinburgh and Glasgow, same country, very different cities. In Edinburgh, when a gun goes off, it's 1 o'clock.
Edinburgh loves Glasgow humour too. Glasgow humour is the lingua franca of Scottish humour, really. At first I didn't know that until I played Aberdeen and all that. It's Glasgow they want to hear, Glaswegian.
Glasgow was probably one of the cities in the country that had the most theatres.
And these theatres, especially in Glasgow, they just opened up local neighbourhood theatres, from the Gorbals to the Gallowgate, very much of the people, for the people.
It was a really, really scruffy theatre called the Queen's Theatre. I was once taken to the balcony because I insisted on seeing what it was like. I love theatre. And I remember the audience down below were sitting in benches.
One part was tip-up seats and another part was benches.
And if they didn't like the act, they threw things on stage. And somebody actually did stand at the wings and did pull them off with a long hook thing. That really did exist. I remember my mother being furious that my father had taken me there. How could you take her there?
Glasgow had a very, very distinctive style of variety theatre, which was very much working class.
It was always basically the same, but it's why variety was so good, because you've got so many different acts.
Because you never knew. If you got a programme, you knew it was on, but sometimes it was better without a programme. It was a surprise what was coming on.
You wanted to see the sport acts. They were part and parcel of your evening. So you'd get your dancers. You'd have a novelty act, which could be a dog.
Then you'd have perhaps a magician or a juggler.
You'd get your soubrette, who would sing songs. They were called soubrettes. They would sometimes put the words of the song down so that you could actually sing. It would be mad songs. An aeroplane, away, way up a kye, that sort of thing. Mad. But the audience loved it and joined in. It was just amazing, amazing. And I'm very glad to have been part of it. The only place that lives still and does variety is the Pavilion.
I think we're probably the only traditional variety theatre left in Glasgow.
It's a great shape theatre for comedy. It's intimate and it's lovely and it's centre of town, and it was a brilliant place for comedy.
And it is a typical
variety
hall.
The difference in the Pavilion is that you're very close to them. The balcony comes down and sits in a curve, and you could almost shake hands with someone sitting in their little ashtrays at the side, we call them. You could shake hands with somebody that's so close to you.
You speak to the man in the box, and that's where that localised close humour developed from, and that made them feel much warmer. Well, you see the first 6 rows.
And then you can see the reaction, the people can see the reaction of the people's faces in the box as well, so they've got two audiences. They're watching the stage and they're watching the people in the box if they're talking to them.
Who are you?
I am a Spanish bullfighter.
Oh, you're a matador, a toreador.
No, I'm a shutador. Good memory. place for me, this theatre. Because Ian and I met here. We met in this theatre in the Johnny Beach Pants Hall.
Ian was the electrician and Jeanette was one of the dancers on stage. So, and the romance blossomed, I think, and still going.
And he used to throw me sweets down.
That sounds terrible.
Mary made caramel.
Do you want a sweetie wee girl?
I can't see what the tag is. It's too rude.
Here, now keep quiet, Sonny. There's a show on.
Would you like a crisp?
No, he doesn't want a crisp. Just keep quiet. So, as you can gather from my accent, I'm from Scotland.
I can't find the wee blue bag.
The man who was the big star at the Pavilion round about 1949, I'm talking about, was Tommy Morgan. And Tommy Morgan was a lovely man to work with. Clarity, clarity was his saying.
Oh, clarity, clarity, be full of the joys of spring. Don't let trouble trouble you, and good luck it will bring.
His catchphrase was clarity, clarity, which was a derivation of I declare, I declare. I don't know how it came into clarity, clarity, it just kind of shortened in.
He was a great, great man, a great comic, and had great following at the Pavilion. He was there for years and years and years.
He performed there at least 19 years, 19 summer seasons.
I saw Tommy, well, you'll fall about this.
Oh, really?
At my Auntie Jessie's wedding. Because in those days, you used to have weddings. You either had the wedding do at the... But sometimes you went to the theatre, and we all went to the theatre, and we were in the box.
After the church?
After the church.
After they had...
We had fish and chips at the Berkeley, and then we went to the theatre. There'd be about 40 of us, I suppose.
Funny wedding, isn't it?
Funny, isn't it, what they used to do? And Tommy Morgan was on.
Tommy Morgan's ashes were secretly buried in the attic in here, so we just leave him alone and he looks down on us. I think that's the thing, he looks after us. There always seems to be something, a show that comes out the blue for the Pavilion, and not saves us, but keeps us going.
I bought him that jacket, the wine jacket.
Yeah.
I bought him that. And I told him that night, I said, son, you wear that jacket and you will meet the woman of your dreams.
Oh.
And he ended up with Pearl.
Two Irish people came into the theatre, wanted to hire the theatre for a summer season. And I said, what's it for, a play, you know, Mrs Brown? I said, oh, no, that'll no. They went away, they come back every day into the foyer and stood there until I saw them. And this went on for probably a week. I kind of chased them and said, no, that'll never work, you know.
I think what Brendan O'Carroll does will resonate with Glaswegians because it's so down to earth in the way that the people love in Glasgow.
Mark told me he had the best mother in the world, and it turned out to be you.
So,
Mrs Brown...
I'm not finished me stare yet.
At first I didn't know it was a man at all. It's so believable as that little Irish housewife. Terrific, terrific. Very, very funny.
I was just glad they waited 12 years and I get 12 years out of it before it disappeared into... Because it's now doing arenas, you know, so I'm glad I got the 12 years business out of it. And surprised, yeah, I'm surprised because it's not the usual kind of comedy that television would take on, you know. It's how could you say it? It's old-fashioned variety. Really, that's where it stems from, you know. I think we're the only sliding roof in the UK, and it really used to be the advert, come and see the stars at the Pavilion. They opened the roof at the interval and you looked up and there were the stars. They weren't on the stage, they were up in the sky.
I used to open that roof when I worked there, when I was the electrician. Yeah.
You used to clean that big chandelier.
There's no chandelier there because it fell down when I was cleaning it. They used to have two beautiful big chandeliers, and they were doing I was supposed to unwind it, and a huge big thing you had to do. Anyway, I flipped the ratchet up, and it wouldn't go back down, and it just comes smashing down. So, and they were doing a dress rehearsal at the time, and the man who owned the theatre, Mr. Ballantyne, just said to me, "That's dreadful, dear boy. Take the other one down. We can't risk that." I didn't tell him it was me. That just flipped it. Obviously, there was something wrong with it. Yeah.
you're a little bit well off, you know, so you pay your 1 6 or something, or a shilling to get into the local, then you might, if you had a little bit more money, you then go to the Empire on a Saturday night, maybe to see some top-notch entertainer.
When you went out with your first boyfriends, you knew you had arrived if you were taken to the Empire Theatre and sat in the front row. And then you discovered years later that the boyfriends that took you there had sort of regular bookings. It didn't matter who they took on the Saturday night, but you were special.
Glasgow Empire opened in 1891, and that's when it started off with the big shows coming over, the big orchestras and that. And then through the years, it slowly built up, and people went to Empire to see the big stars. Harry Houdini, while he was appearing in Glasgow, the great escapologist, at one point went to use the backstage toilet, got locked in the toilet, couldn't get out, and one of the cleaners or the porter had to come and free him. It's a kind of hard one to believe that Harry Houdini would get himself locked in to a toilet. I wouldn't think so, but that's the story.
Probably the most famous act to play the Empire was Wilson, Capel and Betty.
They did a Sandance. Now, to this day, you would never think that these people could earn a living coming on dressed like the Sphinx and doing a Sandance to that song, da 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 da, that one. But they did.
Da da dee dee dee. The dress with a wee face and a wee short white skirt. They played it probably more than anybody ever. And that particular week, I did Wilson, Capel and Beattie. And we did the same thing. And I wrote a wee thing, we are the Carlton Coolies, but we're no foolies, not on your life and your life and your life. We've come to sell it. And I did the song. Then we did the wee dance and that.
The problem with the audience in the Empire, when they went to the Empire, they wanted to see the star. So the supporting acts got a hard time sometimes.
Glasgow is remembered by everybody in our business pure and simply from the Glasgow Empire, which was reputed to be the comedian's graveyard.
Comics graveyard. It's where they died.
This was the reputation that Glasgow Empire got. That's the one theatre people in our business talk about, the Glasgow Empire. And if you say the Glasgow Empire to older performers, they usually go, oh. They remember it.
I remember once going on there and we came off to our own footsteps. Yeah. And the fireman was in the corner and he said to us, he says, they're getting to like you. He said,
really? Yeah, well, they hadn't thrown anything.
They hadn't thrown anything, yes. They sat there.
And there's a comic, I won't mention his name, but he fainted, Des O'Connor.
Yes.
I won't mention his name. He actually walked on and went, well,
as a kid, I used to see some southern comics die in their backside in Glasgow. Poor Des O'Connor was one of them, God bless him.
And there's the famous story of Des O'Connor fainting on stage. Poor Des.
I fainted with fear at Glasgow Empire. No one told me that the national sport at that time of Scotland was go to the Empire on a Friday night and wait for the English comic. And I'd been in show business about half an hour. 4 weeks, to be exact. And my agent said, well, you know, if you do well up there, there's 35 weeks on that tour, that Moss Empire circuit. And I went up there, and I didn't know what I was going into. And they dragged me from my room, half made up, half hair done, threw me on, and I walked out, and I was about as funny as a road accident, you can imagine. And I was telling the jokes back to front. I said to myself, you just told that one. No, you didn't. Yes, you did. Well, I won't know. I didn't get a laugh first time. And actually hearing a silence. You can hear a silence. Listen. when it's that quiet, it gets louder. When there's 3,000 people watching you. So I thought, I don't need this. I'm going to faint. It took a lot of courage now, I realised on stupidity. And I went down in a heap on the stage, and I remember the musical director's head, he pulled himself up over the footlights, he said, "Is this in the act, son? Is this in the act?" I said, "No, get me off, I fainted." And they dragged me off through the curtains, upstairs. Eric Morecambe, for years, he started some of the stuff. He said that I was the only comic selling advertising space on the soles of his shoes.
The story there was, he was rushed up to the Royal Infirmary in Glasgow. His manager, I believe, followed him up and says, "Come on, get back, you're on again," the second half. And he appeared about another 8 times after that in the Glasgow Empire, so it couldn't have been that bad.
I think a lot of the comics come on, they look nervous, you know, and that just made them worse.
What a hard life they have when they walk out on that stage. And there's all those people looking at them and they think, "God, I hope you're going to laugh. I hope you haven't had a bad day." And they put in the first gag and they wait for that reaction.
If they didn't get a laugh, they got worse, because comedians, they thrive on input, and if it got quieter and quieter and quieter, you could actually see them cringe, dying to get off.
All artists were nervous playing the Empire Glasgow, no doubt about it. They were a tough audience.
They say that Shirley Bassey, when she came, the first time she came, they were talking and shirking her, and she just stopped dead and went to the front of the stage and told them if they didn't shut up, she wasn't singing. And they just, that was it. She had them in the palm of her hand after that.
They are good audiences because they understand creativity and performance. And if they like you, they're wonderful. But if they don't like you, they let you know.
They lose all interest in you whatsoever, and you might as well just leave because you're doing nowhere any good, you or them, so you just get off the stage.
The verbal comedians with their southern accent weren't liked by a lot of Scottish audiences because they couldn't understand them.
I went on and I started a little preamble, praying, and I'm not a religious man, but praying that I wouldn't be killed. And a bloke in the gods shouted out, "Oh, away hame, you Sassenach! Who are you coming up from London with all your la-di-da?" Well, I was trying to speak English.
Somebody like Bruce Forsyth now would be out there, and so if somebody shy-iked him from the audience, bang, you put in a line in and cut it.
Good evening. How are you? All right? All right. We wondered where you were. That's it. Got the sandwiches?
Bob Monkhouse would be the same. If his only problem was, he used to say that if he did get a shy-ike from the audience, he had to let it go past because he couldn't always understand the diction.
Get off, you big jazz. Get back and see him.
But no, there is a swathe of Scots who are sort of anti-English. And the lower down you go in the class is an awful thing to say, the more you get of that. And the more kind of sentimental they are about Scotland in a quite ridiculous way.
I'm only a common old working lad, as anyone can see. But when I get a couple of drinks on a Saturday, Glasgow belongs to me.
All the trouble, really, and all this heckling thing you hear about them, it would be on a Friday night later. The licensing laws in those days were extremely strict. No drink whatsoever after 9:30.
So they'd sunk a few, and if the bar was still open in the theatre, it was at the interval, it was the last chance they had to get a drink before it. So when they came back, they had quite a few.
Then they'd go to the theatre. It was a let's party time, you know.
They used to throw things as well. I never had that, thank God. But I've seen people having tomatoes and things thrown at them.
the pennies would come from the gallery and land on the stage, and some comics would make a joke of it and pick up the money and say, good, that'll help my wages this week, and others would say, oh, it just put them off kind of thing, you know.
And then they realised, being Scotsmen, that they were mad throwing money away. So they used to take the screws from their work or small parts of rivets and things and throw them, and they were quite dangerous, as you can imagine.
The classic story of all time, of course, is the Mike and Bernie Winters story.
And they came up here before they were known as Mike and Bernie Winters. They really were just starting off in their careers.
Everybody's talking about me. I've just made a very big novelty record. A novelty record? They say I'm going to be the next Shirley Bassey. Shirley Bassey is a girl. I told you it was a novelty record.
Mike was the straight man who went on first.
And he'd come on and play the clarinet, right? It wasn't bad, but they didn't like it very much.
And he was dying the death quietly.
And suddenly, from behind the curtains, appeared Bernie.
Who puts his head through the curtains and goes, and the voice from the gallery said, Christ, there's two of them.
And every time you died?
Well, it was getting pretty regular, yes.
Why did you ever think of giving it up?
Well, I couldn't. It was my living, wasn't it?
The biggest problem was to get southern artists, especially comedians, to work Glasgow because it was a tough theatre.
You were in a trap. If you wanted to play the #1 dates, you had to play Glasgow.
So yes, there was a problem. Sometimes it could be covered by an extra fee.
There's a little mouse walking along the pavement on Piccadilly there, and a woman frightened it, and he stepped off the curb and got knocked down by a bus. Picked himself up, went across the road, went into a music shop. Said the man behind the counter, do you sell mouse organs?
There was another story, Max Miller, years ago, who'd appeared in the Empire, and did his stint, and his agent asked him a few weeks later to go back up to the Empire, and he said no. He said, I'm not a missionary, I'm a comedian. So he didn't want to go back up to the Empire.
Down the line, the train came puffing. Scotland 10, England nothing.
It's not true to say that it was just the graveyard for everybody. I think Ken Dodd had a difficult time to begin with, but then was beloved and came back many a time.
I'll talk to you, sir. You look full of the spirit. He's full of something. He keeps slipping out of his seat. No.
My first line to a Glasgow audience was, I suppose you're all wondering why I've sent for you. And a man uncoiled himself from up the third row with half a bottle of whiskey, and he looked at me and said, Cripes, what a horrible sight. And the audience roared, and that was it. I was in.
Ken could play anywhere and do well. He just won't go until he does well.
I go to the doctor's, and the doctor tells me I need a holiday. He said, why not take a hiking holiday? Have a break, have a kit bag. So I said to him, I said, well, while I'm at it, could I have a wig with a hole in, because I might be playing a bit of polo? He said, no, certainly not. He said, there's too much of this abusing the National Health Service. He said, we had a fella in here this morning, he wanted 4 wooden legs, he was making a coffee table. So, anyhow, as I said,
Yeah, he still comes out every year and does two nights in the pavilion, sold out houses. You're there at 1 o'clock in the morning, take your sandwiches and your flask, yeah. It's still going strong.
I got more than my share of happiness.
In the 1950s, of course, a lot of the big American acts came over. It was a threat, I think. They said, you want to play the London Palladium? And every American did. Certainly, you shall play the Palladium, but you have to do a week at the Glasgow Empire.
The Glasgow Empire was the start of the European tour, and they said, if you made it at the Glasgow Empire, you could make it anywhere.
A lot of the American stars were very popular up there. Bob Hope was, but he had to admit, his line was, he said, if they like you, they let you live. He said.
Now, we don't have titles in America. We have 2 classes, the people and the Kennedys. and there are more Kennedys than people.
Jack Benny, and you couldn't get more American, and Bob Hope the same, but Benny more. I think they liked the thing that he portrayed as I've been so mean. The Scots, I'm sorry, Scotland, they liked that.
Of course, I know what you're laughing at. You know, you believe all that stuff about my being stingy, and you call it mean over here, I believe, because... But believe me, ladies and gentlemen, that is a character that I assume on the television just for your entertainment, because I'm not stingy or anything. I throw my money away, you know. Not far, but
I was doing one of those seasons at the Alhambra when Eartha Kitt was playing the Empire. And my wife went to see it.
I'm just an old-fashioned girl with an old-fashioned mind. Not sophisticated, I'm the sweet and simple kind. I want an old-fashioned house with an old-fashioned fence and an old-fashioned millionaire.
But anyway, I got the news from my wife that she had dried. She kind of fluffed a couple of lines and was pretty mortified. How mortified my wife discovered when the agent who had come up from London to support Eartha grabbed my wife and said, "She's very temperamental. Come backstage. I'm going to need all the help I can get." So my wife went backstage, but unfortunately, the manager of the theatre had invited two Kelvinside ladies round. "We rather like to meet Eartha Kitt." "Oh, well, come backstage and I'll introduce you." So those hapless ladies not being in the business and not realising how vulnerable artists are after they've given a performance, especially ones in which you've just bucketed something up, they sailed into the dressing room and said, "Hello, we enjoyed your performance very much. Did you forget your lines at one point?" Well, of course, Eartha was curled up like a cat, glaring at them. And my wife rushed in and said, "No, Miss Kitt, it was wonderful."
I saw a matinee with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and Jerry Lewis was walking up and down the corridor. And I never realised he was so handsome. And the stage doorkeeper said to me, "Jerry Lewis is very upset. Dean Martin's not here yet." And this was for a matinee. And I said, "Oh." He said, "Yes, they think he's been out on the booze."
Pour it as quickly as you can. Hey, brother, pour the wine.
Jerry Lewis was getting distraught because the show was due to go up very shortly. And I was standing at the stage door, and all of a sudden this car drew up, and out came Dean Martin.
Pour the wine, pour the wine, pour the wine.
And I think they'd found them in a hotel in Loch Lomond, him and the musical director. So they were getting about Scotland while they were there. But Jerry Lewis wasn't at all pleased.
Hey, brother, pour the wine, pour the wine.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. Keynote.
No, not now. What do you want to do it now for? Do you know what's next on the agenda?
No, but I'm all set up and ready.
I don't care if you're set up and ready. You can't do it now.
Wouldn't stop me when I was just standing. You waited till I got the band set and everything?
I just wanted to see if you were going to go through with this thing.
All right.
What are you, out of your nitwit?
All right.
Heavens to Beth, do you know what comes now?
No.
Well, you better, because I don't.
But another wonderful story is Liberace. Despite being American, he didn't leave any tips, and these stagehands were just on a pittance, and they really expected, you know, a few pounds in their pocket at the end of the night. But the problem with Liberace was not so much him and his lack of gratitude, was his piano. This was an 18-inch rake on the Empire. Two stagehands had to hide under the piano the entire performance, holding on to the legs and the wheels to stop it rolling into the pit. And he still didn't give them a tip.
people like Laurel and Hardy, great international stars, the only reason they got away, because they knew them from the films, and they would suddenly start, very sensibly, they'd start singing, to West Virginia.
In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine.
Well, they liked that, and they'd see them do it on the screen, you see. So they got away with it. And they did the usual mucking about. They liked that.
Like the mountains, I'm blue, like the pine. I am lonesome for you.
In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine.
Can you imagine how exciting that was? You know, you'd seen the movies perhaps as a kid, and then Laurel and Hardy, after the silent movie era, they went touring.
I think the American influx really was the first time ever someone from outside Scotland had made an impression on the audiences. So suddenly they weren't English people, they were from somewhere else, and they accepted this. They thought this was okay. And of course, most of the American acts were blooming good anyway.
I mean, they loved Danny Kaye. I think they thought he was a Scotsman. Mackay. Because they'd seen him on the screen.
Danny Kaye was enormous. Oh!
He apparently came on stage and sat down on the stage with his legs dangling into the orchestra pit and wowed them.
I was at the Pavilion appearing in the show when Danny Kaye came to the Empire, and I couldn't see him. But I came out the theatre after the show this night, and I'm walking down the road, and I saw this car pass, and there was hundreds of people following it. The audience obviously had come out the Empire, saw the car, knew that Danny Kaye was in it, and ran behind the car all the way down to the Central Hotel. So I followed on and ran down the road behind all the crowd, and we got to the Central Hotel, and everybody shouting, "We want Danny, we want Danny."
And I was sitting there, "We want Danny, we want Danny." It's about midnight or something.
And eventually the doors opened, and out came Danny Kaye onto this little balcony.
I need to come out and sit in the balcony and sing Ball in the Jack.
First you put your two knees close up tight. You swing 'em to the left and then you swing 'em to the right. Step around the floor kinda nice and light, and then you didn't make me laugh. All of them mine.
And everyone in the street did the movements. First you put your two knees close up tight. You swing 'em to the left, then you swing 'em to the right. Step round the floor kinda nice and light. And then you shake around with all your might. Everybody in Glasgow that was out there in the street was doing Ball on the Jack.
Spread your loving arms way out in space. You do the eagle rock with such style and grace. You put your left foot on and then you bring it back. That's what I call it.
And I'll never forget it. It's one of the things I'll always remember. And I thought, can you imagine this huge star, and he was a big, big film star, out in the middle of Glasgow singing Ball on the Jack.
First you put your two knees, hey, all together now. Could only happen in Glasgow.
But when I get a couple of drinks on a Saturday, Glasgow belongs to me. Oh, Glasgow belongs to me. Oh, yeah, Glasgow belongs to me.
Mexico, where the breezes blow, there I'm bound to go, senorita.
Roy Rogers and Trigger were my first crushes as a child. I equally was in love with the horse as much as I was in love with him.
I know he came to the Empire with his horse, Trigger. We saw the horse box draw up and Trigger come out, but I was never lucky enough to get close to him to see him.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in.
He was called the singing cowboy because he used to do a lot of songs. And Trigger he used to dance with him. He used to pick things up off the stage. He would count, you know, what's 2 and 2, and he'd paw the stage 4 times and things like this.
You please, don't fence me in, just turn me loose.
Story was at the time they were staying in the Central Hotel. They brought Trigger along to the Central and they took him into Central and up the staircase. And I think there was a wee balcony at the time and they came out in the balcony and everybody, all the people were standing outside. Oh, Trigger's staying there as well.
A four-legged friend, a four-legged friend, he'll never let you down.
One of the stories I met a guy that worked in the Empire at the time, and I believe he said Trigger wasn't a very nice horse, because as they passed, they always tried to have a bite at them. So being stagehands, and Glasgow stagehands in particular, they used to give it a kick when they were passing just to annoy it, so.
How old was Trigger when he died?
Trigger was 33, and in comparison to man's age, that makes him about 115. But boy, he was a great horse. He was iron. And he carried me through 188 pictures. And if there's a heaven for horses, that's where Trigger is.
That wonderful 1, 2, 3, four-legged friend. Whoa, Trigger.
The 50s did very well. But then, of course, it slowly petered out because the younger people, the variety theatre wasn't their world. And then, of course, rock and roll came along.
It was a hybrid. The variety shows were a hybrid. They were old-fashioned turns and new wave turns. It couldn't make up its mind. And certainly, you know, jugglers and people like that, the kids that come in to see Cliff or the Rolling Stones, and these other people would be on the bill and say, who are these old geezers who are doing it? It was a different sort of entertainment.
The young ones, darling, we're the young ones, and young ones shouldn't be afraid.
I saw Cliff Richard and all the girls were at the stage door and scratching a car they thought was his, and it turned out not to be his car. And it was all, I love you, Cliff, scratched in the car. But that was my first time I ever met Cliff Richards, was some poor soul's car was all, I love you, Cliff. But he was a handsome young man and a great performer with the Shadows, wonderful.
Well, I mean, in those days, there wasn't the television and all that, but the people knew them through records mostly. Johnny Ray and Frankie Lane and all these people, you know.
It was a night, what a night it was, it really was such a night.
And I had Johnny Ray there, and at that time he had hit number after hit number, Just Walking in the Rain, things like that.
Just walking in the rain, so alone and blue.
Johnny Ray was a very big one there because at the time there they had to have the commissionaires right along the front of the circle because the girls were ready to throw themselves off for Johnny Ray.
People were trying to get on the stage and things like that. That's a wonderful moment for an artist, as long as he's got people protecting him.
They'd been saying it was the end of variety since about 1789, you know, they've been saying, but it's always survived. Sadly, when television came along, that was really the final nail in the coffin, because you could sit at home there, you know, the beer was cheaper than it was going to the pub, sit at home, having a think, you could see the people, hear them, almost free. That's what did variety.
Television was coming in. Now, for a while, that helped to support the places like the Empire where the big stars went, because people would then go to see who they'd seen television, go and see them in the Empire live. But as time went on, people stopped going. They could just watch them on the television, and it just slowly declined and declined.
Television, we have a lot to be thankful for, but it's killed a lot of acts. Because once they were seen on television, who was going to pay to go and see them on stage?
And also the city of Glasgow got rid of a lot of the housing within the city centre. So all the tenement buildings, right round the pavilion here was tenement buildings with people staying in it. So I think that disappeared as well. So people moved out the city. They didn't come back into the city for a night's entertainment, you know.
It's a tremendous upheaval. Still, the plan's going ahead pretty fast. And as the families move out, the old buildings come crashing down.
The minute they pushed them out to those housing estates, that's when it started to go down, I think, because you couldn't get out.
Before they started redeveloping Glasgow, people stayed within walking distance of the theatres or a short tram car or bus ride. But when they moved them all out to places like Drumchapel, Castlemilk, Pollock, it was a long bus ride in.
There was no buses after 8 o'clock at night. And then they wondered why they got riots out there. Nothing for them to do.
Well, I know that the Empire closed in 1963.
And I co-produced the last night in the Glasgow Empire. And I walked in backstage and they're painting it all. And I knocked at the lad and the guy looked, "Oh, Johnny, what are you doing?" I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "We're painting all backstage here." I said, "But they're pulling the place down 10 days from now." He says, "I know that." He said, "But it's the Red Army ensemble for the last week. And they just want the place nice for them." They did a wonderful show. You know, the Russians, the soldiers. They painted the whole place 10 days.
I think the last show I saw there was before it closed down. It was the Russian army, and that was amazing. And then what they did, they brought the usherettes on stage, and all the front of house team were brought on because the theatre, sadly, was closing down.
And you'll never guess who was one of the people in it. Albert Finney.
Albert Finney was in it, and Duncan McRae, and at the very end they both came out with pickaxes and they struck the first blows into the stage in the demolition of the Empire. And that was the last thing in the Empire. But a guy emailed me at one point regarding that he was one of the demolition team. He says, "Well, I'm actually the last guy to sing in the Empire." He says, "Before we demolished the stage," he said, "I went up and sung Champion the Wonder Horse." It was sad, it was a shame, it was a great shame, because it was a great theatre.
Like the swiftest arrow whizzing from a bow.
I mean, we sang Auld Lang Syne like it's never been sung before. Yeah. It was sad to see it going, you know, it really was.
Well, it was a death of a theatre. You don't want to see a theatre dying.
Previous to the last night, they had taken all the lead weights out the bottom of the curtains, sold them off to the scrap merchant, made a few bob for themselves, and made arrangements to sell the velvet curtains once the place shut down, once the theatre shut, which they did as soon as the show shut down. The next morning, they brought the curtains down, rolled them up. The guy that was selling came around in his van, put them into the van, and he just buggered off. He never paid them. It went away with the curtains, so they never got a halfpenny from them. But somebody somewhere's probably got a set of curtains made from the Empire. The turned it into a big office block, and I think that lay half empty for a long time. Dino's restaurants just there in front of Sucky Hall Street, and an Ann Summers shop right on the corner. There used to be a plaque there just next to the Ann Summers shop, but somebody at some point went round Glasgow and nicked all the plaques where the theatres used to be, and disappeared.
The Alhambra Theatre, until not so very long ago the showplace of show business north of the border. To the public, it was the ultimate in theatre going, the big night out of the live show circuit. Going to Alhambra meant your good suit, or for the ladies, a party dress and a special hairdo. But now, alas, the theatre has been stripped of all its finery. The place lies empty, gathering dust and awaiting the imminent arrival of the bulldozers, which will render this once high temple of sophisticated variety into a shapeless mass of rubble and twisted girders.
Before anybody had any chance to do something about stopping them, they actually moved in the day after they'd said they were thinking about stopping it and demolished one of the walls.
They don't do that now. I think they've got to get permission to knock things down now, haven't they? Not just a few, Bob, get it now.
It was the most wonderful theatre I think I've ever been in my life, and I've played some rather good ones in London. But the Alhambra was very, very special.
This is all that remains of the Alhambra Theatre, at one time the biggest, the newest and the best equipped theatre in Scotland.
It was very sad. It was like, I remember an old actor saying to me, "This is the death of the dinosaurs," he said. And, you know, it was all very downbeat and sad, really. But we still have live theatre, which is the thing that it's all about.
Well, fortunately, there is still pantomime, yes. And fortunately, it still maintains a tradition. Because they do get to join in, and the children love it. And if the children love it, the adults love it.
What do you call a Scottish Red Indian?
I don't know. What do you call a Scottish Red Indian?
Hawkeye the New!
A lot of pantos have moved on and just become big shows rather than audience participation and things. We've kept a tradition in our panto of audience participation, but bring it into today's technology with lighting and lasers and special effects, and it's probably our main show in the year.
If we do a good panto and we get good money for panto, that keeps us going. We don't need to be bothered running up and down the country doing other things. At our stage, and I say, well, everybody says, "Oh, you're so lucky." I think, no, I've worked for it. I've been 50 years in the game.
I used to get so angry when they read in the papers, "He's now reduced to playing pantomime." I thought, reduced to playing pantomime? My pantomimes were as glamorous as the television show.
I'm Neptune's daughter, love sudsy water. Come and plunge your sponge into my beautiful foam.
This is a creation which must be as good as the televisions, and therefore I want, if I'm doing Dame, I want the Dame things to look wonderful. And I was a complete chandelier in one, and then pressed a button and it all lit up, you know, that kind of thing. I think my costumes probably cost more than any other costumes that anybody has had, but I could be wrong about that. But I also loved doing those pantomimes because you could tell the whole story, but then keep putting in dialect words. I remember when I was playing An Ugly Sister, Cinderella left the invitation to the ball on a mantelpiece, and I had a long gloves to the elbow. And when you did that, it could look like a strange snake, you know. And when the ugly sister spotted this ball ticket, which she shouldn't have on her mind, this snake-like thing went out. And as you did that and got nearer and nearer, you could hear the whole audience going, breathing in, as I grabbed it and said, "Where did this ball ticket comfy?" Now, the comfy, of course, was a huge laugh, because that's how they say come from.
The humour
you don't have to think about it because it is the humour of the people. It's your humour. It's what you were brought up with. It's since birth.
When I played south of the border, pantomime south of the border, I didn't enjoy it nearly so much because you had to cut out all those dialect words. And all those dialect words is why I used to go back and do it.
Note carefully the key word helza. This we are apt to use at social functions, thus. When the hell's a party starting? Or why the hell's a birds no here? And most frequently we say, where the hell's a booze?
I appeared with him in the Theatre Royal in Glasgow, my first pantomime, and that was Cinderella. And Stanley Baxter was Buttons. And he was the best Buttons I have ever seen. I used to stand in the wings every night and cry. The minute he proposed to Cinderella, it used to break my heart because she turned him down, obviously. But he did it so beautifully that the tears would be streaming down your number 5, 9 and 3 grease paint makeup that you wore.
Somebody said once, I think it might have been Sybil Thorndike, that the National Theatre in Scotland is pantomime. There's some truth in it. We take it much more seriously.
Pantomime it's like group therapy. I mean, you're sitting in your dressing room half an hour before the curtain, the tanner's on and they're all coming in and the noise and the pat, and they're talking to their kids, oh, you've never seen a wait till you see this, oh, blah, 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 blah. And it's crackling off the wall, the tannoy. And then the overture, the curtain goes up, and never be cheers. We haven't even said hello.
3,000 people cheer. It's like a drug.
As I say, I would prescribe it in National Health. Never mind the pills, get them tickets for the pantomime.
Oops.
I wish I was in Glasgow with some good old friends of mine, some good old rough companions, some good old smooth red wine. We would talk about the old days and the old town's sad decline, and drink with the boys on the road. Glasgow gave me more than it ever took away, and prepared me for life on the road.